I'm going to introduce Susan Podziba, and she is from the she's a public policy mediator from Podziba Policy Mediation, and I believe you also do some work with MIT, is that correct?
We have a Sacred Lands project.
Okay, on the Sacred Lands project. So she's going to be talking to us about mediating sacred land disputes.
Thank you, and thank you for sticking with the program. It's been a long couple of days, so I appreciate your presence here. The title of my paper is Mediating Conflicts Over Sacred Lands. Conflicts over sacred lands are a unique subset of policy and international disputes. They're conflicts in which tangible issues that in ordinary conflicts would be able to be negotiated become very complex because the sacred is embedded within those otherwise ordinary issues. Typical methods of conflict resolution simply have not been effective in these disputes, and so new or refined approaches need to be developed. In our time together, I would like to think with you about what it actually means for land to be sacred, and what that means for how we might approach such conflicts. So these remarks come from a paper that I published in the Conflict Resolution Quarterly, and so as with everybody else's comments, it's a subset of that article, and if you're interested in that article, I can provide you with a copy of it. So I'm going to talk about the sources of sacredness within land, the contexts of sacred land disputes, and the kinds of conflicts that emerge, and how mediators might expand our approaches for such conflicts. So for some groups, all of Mother Earth is sacred. All of the earth, all which grows upon Mother Earth, and all that roams on Mother Earth. For others, particular locations are sacred. They may be the starting point of creation, or they may be the site for particular rituals, or they may be the location of historical or mythical events. So creation stories often point to sacred physical beginnings. The sacred place of Mauna Kea is considered the umbilical cord that connects Hawaii's first people to the cosmos. In earlier times, only high-ranking priests could ascend to its summit for particular rituals. Similarly, the foundation stone, Even Hashtiah in Jerusalem, is considered in Judaism as the source of the creation, the navel from which all creation emanates. According to the Zohar, a mystical Jewish text, the world was not created until God took a stone called Even Hashtiah and threw it into the depths where it was fixed from above till below, and from it the world expanded. It is the center point of the world, and on this spot stood the Holy of Holies. Sacred places may be the unique location for ritual. In South Dakota, the land of the Native American Sioux, is a place called Bear Butte. It's the sacred altar upon which the 7 sacred rites is learned, and it's the site for zoo vision quests. During the vision quest, the seeker sits solitary upon the butte, which is like a plateau, as tribal members pray below in support of his or her quest, and later help interpret the visions that the seeker sought. Sacred places also serve as pilgrimage sites for adherents, such as Mecca for the Muslim Hajj. Places of critical historical events also become imbued with a holiness at the site of the event. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is the place where Muhammad was transported from the sacred mosque in Mecca during the night journey. The Hopi, another Native American tribe, has shrines at specific water springs and mountain peaks that indicate divine instructions of the Hopi's covenant with God for their stewardship of earth and each shrine and sacred place contains an irreplaceable life essence. These are some of the examples of holiness within land. They're places of deep meaning and symbolism, places that go to the core of personal and communal religious practice, and may have a direct effect on one's connection with God and one's own eternal resting place. They're places to be protected from desecration and to be protected for uninterrupted access. They're places where some are willing to die for that protection or to take the lives of others in defense of. So what kinds of conflicts occur in sacred lands? Conflicts emerge among the secular and religious, as well as among diverse religious adherents. Conflicts emerge over competing incompatible land claims or land uses, and also over competing religious claims, uses, and legitimacies. There are numerous conflicts over competing religious and secular land uses. There are many examples of extractive industries seeking to exploit resources on Native peoples' holy lands. An example of that is the conflict over construction of what's called the 30-meter telescope. It's a $1.4 billion telescope that was proposed for a mountaintop in Hawaii. And in that place, Native Hawaiians are asserting a claim of ancestral sacred land rights. This is a case that's gone to the Supreme Court and is still being litigated. Intractable conflicts sometimes emerge across groups that share in the sacredness of place. For example, the ancient conflicts across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam over the sacred esplanade of Jerusalem continue to this day in the form of competing exclusive claims and denial of others' religious claims for land that all agree is sacred. Clearly, typical negotiations and methods of mediation will not succeed in resolving this dispute. It's not possible to negotiate the sacred. We can't negotiate a monetary settlement. No tribe or religious group will willingly accept compensation to give up or allow desecration of their site. We can't trade a site for another site. A sacred site of origin for a people, for instance, can't be traded for another site. We can't divide a holy site. They're indivisible. During the Camp David negotiations over the sacred esplanade of Jerusalem, a proposal to give the top to the Palestinians and the bottom to the Israelis was rejected by both sides. However, what is the essential element over sacred lands? It's the sacred land. It's the sacred land that offers potential for territorial access to the divine. Sacred lands offer access to the divine through ritual, through prayer, and through proximity. This access to the sacred, then, is the source for possible approachment of the conflict. A mediation process then emerges from this. So if we say that the source of resolution is, in fact, the sacred, then we can start to design a process from which that would fall. So mediators always determine who needs to participate. So if we're asking the question, how does access to the sacred from a sacred space become available, we have to ask the question, who should participate? Is it religious leaders? But today, our religious leaders are actually religious political leaders. This is the time that we live in. So many of those that are identified as religious leaders are actually very political. So how then do we identify the holy people? The people who we go to for questions about practice, for questions about access to the sacred. How do we identify them? And how do we reach out to them? And how would we expect them to reach out on these sacred lands to access the sacred? Would they access the sacred individually, jointly, with adherents, with others within whom they're in dispute? Is it possible to imagine shared moments among adherents and faith leaders of multiple religions for connection to divine that is inherent in the land they dispute? And if this effort were made, what might God teach about the intent of the space if we could access such wisdom? What might we learn? How would we make sense of it? How would holy leaders translate their experiences and learnings back into political terms in the way that the vision seeker on Bear Butte translates his or her visions into a sense of what their purpose in life is? So I suggest that this is the challenge for the mediator of sacred land disputes, to identify the holy faith leaders, to help design the processes for reaching out for simultaneous connection to the divine, and to assist in putting into words the interpretations of the visions that emerge from this experience to approximate as much as humanly possible that which the divine commands of its adherents. So in conclusion, sacred land disputes are a unique category of conflict. As such, mediators working in this arena must understand the dynamics and contexts such disputes pose and be prepared to respond to the unique challenges that result from clashes among religious adherents' commitments to ancestral lands and commercial interests, as well as competing sacred land claims. In some of these situations, political or military powers may unilaterally assert its group's or nation's right to a site, but such arrangements will be stable only as long as the power structure is maintained. Ancient peoples have long memories, carried across generations, concerning their sacred lands. Political and military power is temporal, whereas claims to ancestral lands may be eternal. Sustainable agreements, then, require addressing the sacred. Thank you.